say a bit more?
Yes. So, to start with, there was a multitude of issues, really. The operation was planned in a very, very, very short timescale indeed. I think about 2 weeks, possibly less. And as a result, there were elements of it which just simply were very, very rickety indeed. Um, so let's kick the operation off. We have the Airborne coming across the channel, um, flying across the American Airborne also, and they dropped in both gliders and by parachute. The Americans dropping near Nijmegen, so a grave, and they then had to defend against very heavy German counterattacks. However, one of the big issues there was quite a bit of flak there, and as a result, a lot of gliders were shot down before they actually got there. Because, as Tim said, it's going into the Ruhr, which is where the Allied bombers all go. So naturally, the Germans were putting, a lot of heavier flak batteries in the area. So that starts, the American operation off. At the same time, the British start their big advance on the ground. So, advancing with their Sherman, Cromwell tanks, Sherman Fireflies. I think also Challengers. Now, some people will be thinking, Challengers? What? They're modern. No, the name actually dates back to the Second World War, when there was a British tank named the Challenger armed with a 17-pounder, and it's basically just a longer Cromwell with a different turret. But that's by the by. So I've read accounts of, because they were pretty much advancing up one road, the Germans put a massive, massive choke point on that road, and, loads of tanks got knocked out. Quite a few crews were killed because the British were slightly war-weary after, slogging through Normandy. You then end up with, this is one very interesting story. So there were two concealed German, possibly Stug tank destroyers, hiding, as the Germans often did, in some hedges up the road. Now, one of them opened fire, missed, and was knocked out. Another couldn't really be seen, and tanks were being killed. So a German commander bailed out of the first Stug and ran up to the first Sherman Firefly he found. He then climbed up aboard and helped them knock out the second tank. Why? His reason was he was actually a professional soldier who had been in, the army before the, Adolf Hitler came to power, and he just didn't want to see people using the wrong tactics or so. He actually quite liked the Firefly, so, the Germans actually preferred the Firefly to the Stug, so that kind of shows you the way things are going. The German command originally thought there was a bit of uncertainty as to how many landings there were, all of that kind of stuff. In fact, the headquarters for the army group in the area, I think Army Group B, don't quote me on that though, actually retreated because airborne troops were actually getting too close. And then another person left later on, decided to just go by a very unknown road pretty much, and ran straight into a British platoon of paratroopers and was instantly killed, which further kind of undermined the Germans' command. But the British had severely, and the Americans as well, had severely underestimated the German forces in the area. So there were two SS Panzer divisions, Hohenstaufen and Hunsberg, re-equipping in that area. Now, they weren't full strength. They had been mauled savagely in the Normandy campaign. However, they still had a lot of their vehicles. They were still pretty well trained and pretty fanatical. So combining all these odds, you really have an issue for the British and the Americans. So going back to Tim.
Right, thanks, Toby. Yeah, there's a lot of incredible stories out there which you have to kind of seep through the little cracks of veterans talking and accounts being told. It's very, very interesting. So, just before I round this part one off, talking about the very, very, very quickly to talk about the equipment. The British Army had in 1944 adopted a new Sten gun, the Mark V Sten gun. It was adopted to replace the Mark III Sten gun, because this Mark V looked more appealing to the British soldier who actually handled it. It wasn't just a lump of metal, it was actually wood, as well as metal or steel. The British troops, of course, armed with the new anti-tank weapon, probably the ones which knocked out those Stugs, and other tanks would be knocked out by the same way, is the PIAT, the Projector Infantry Anti-Tanks. Now they were basically a spigot mortar spring-loaded British anti-tank weapon. And then, of course, when we get to the third part of the video, we'll be talking to much more specifically about the British. So, right, Toby, do you want to send the video, say anything before the video ends?
Just one thing. So he was talking about, how a new Sten was introduced. Meanwhile, if you think about it, yes, there's the MP44/Sturmgewehr coming in around this time. However, these units had not yet been issued it, because they were really just recovering at this stage from the British attack. You had a division which was reduced to 500 men in that area in the Normandy campaign, 352nd, which defended Omaha against the Americans. However, the Germans, meanwhile, were still, a lot of people for some reason think that all the Germans were using M40 or something, and they were just all really well equipped, which isn't the case, because the majority of German forces, one had only just received rifle training, believe it or not. They rushed in loads of new troops to seal the hole in their line, so a few of them had literally had like a week or two's training, which made them incredibly underprepared, and they were still using a rifle, the Mauser K98, which in its name had been around since the 1890s. So you can kind of see that the German army is looking a bit outdated here, but it has not yet given up.
No, alright, thanks Toby. Yeah, so really, when we get into part 2 and part 3 will be far more detail of names and plates and everything. The Allied has really kind of pushed boundaries too far, and really had tried to take on a bridge too far. So, thanks for watching guys, we'll see you in the next part, part 2, and see you guys.